All right, ladies and gentlemen, it being 6 o'clock, I will declare the meeting open. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Ngalakala Budja and Southwest Budjara people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their cultures, and to their elders past, present and emerging. Record of attendance. We have 8 councillors in attendance tonight, with an apology from Councillor Clues. There are no leave of absences. Public question time. I have a few here. Mrs. Bronwyn Mutton of Capel.
Thank you to CEO and Mr. President and councillors. It was good to hear the reply last month from the Shire of Capel to my October question that the management plans have now been made for 28 out of the 140 reserves within the Shire of Capel. It is also good to know that the Shire of Capel recognises remnant vegetation as an asset, and there is currently a review of policies concerning preservation of remnant native vegetation. In the last 50 years within the Shire of Capel, there have been continual, extensive clearing of native vegetation. Unless there is urgent change of ideas and policies, the Shire of Capel is in danger of becoming full urban sprawl, instead of being a rural area with remnant trees and remnant vegetation with flowers, birds and small animals. Question 1. Will both councillors and staff of Shire of Capel write more stringent compliance policies for applications by companies owning land for clearing of native vegetation for extractive industries activities, and also owners of privately owned land when clearing applications are presented?
Thank you, Mrs. Mutton, for the question. The Shire supports strong requirements to protect the clearing of native vegetation. The Shire's Draft Local Planning Scheme 8 includes a provision that requires development approval for the clearing of native vegetation, except in certain circumstances. Under the Draft Local Planning Scheme 8, if native vegetation is present, any proposed clearing would be considered as part of the development assessment, including for an extractive industry licence.
Thank you. Good to hear that reply. Thank you. And my question 2A and B, will both councillors and staff of Shire of Capel undertake a stronger public awareness promotion within the Shire of Capel for the importance of preservation of native vegetation? And will new policies prevent destruction of remnant vegetation by farmers allowing stock to ring bark and kill remnant eucalypts and other significant remnant vegetation?
Thank you for the questions. In response to 2A, the Shire officers work with the public when they plan to legally clear vegetation to minimise the clearing as much as possible, to replant native trees and install possum boxes, and to fulfil any additional requirements or obligations specified within the permit regarding native flora and fauna. Shire staff do this for both larger scale developments and for smaller residential scale developments. And in regards to 2B, as mentioned previously, the Shire's Draft Local Planning Scheme 8 includes a provision that requires development approval for the clearing of native vegetation, except in certain circumstances. The Draft Local Planning Scheme 8 also includes provisions to create a significant tree register, whereby individual or groups, strands of trees can be protected much like a heritage property. This will be accompanied by a policy that details the nomination process and any necessary approvals for the removal or modification, i.e. branch lopping, of the registered significant tree.
And what happens if the cattle ring bark the trees without approval?
Unfortunately, that's the animal's nature. Yeah, but I take your comment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Brian Hayes, Dalyellup.
Thank you, Mr. President and councillors. Back 6-7 months ago, I put a thing towards the council to have the driving or the speeding in Dalyellop Boulevard reduced, or whatever, chicanes, speed humps, I don't care what they are.
Yep.
I mean, we've had 3 accidents on that street. There's a high school and 2 primary schools there, and people are still going up there at 80 and 90 kilometres an hour. And I know that for a fact because I was standing at the front one day when the police pulled him over. I just don't know what can be done about it. Chicanes, whatever. To slow all the other streets, I've got it, bar Dalyellop Boulevard. There's nothing between Norton Prom and Hornibrook to slow vehicles down. If the council could look at it and come back with something.
Sure.
Right, thank you.
So following the public question from March 2021, the Shire collected traffic data through the use of traffic counters at a range of sites through Dalyellop. Traffic monitoring occurred on Dalyellop Boulevard in late 2020 in 2 locations at the 50 kph and 80 kph areas. The traffic data indicated exceedance of the speed limit at both sites. Main Roads WA policy requires an 85th percentile of speed to occur at 10 kilometres per hour over the speed limit to support the installation of traffic calming or speed control measures. The traffic data collected at Dalyellop Boulevard indicated that while speed limits are being exceeded, they are not at the required level to enable traffic calming to be approved or installed under Main Roads policy. The traffic counters indicate a trend for the exceedance of the speed limit, and the data has been passed on to the WA Police. The Shire will continue with its program of monitoring speed in problem locations, and where we are able to, apply for Main Roads funding to install necessary traffic calming and speed control measures. Mr. Glenbow.
Thank you, Mr. President. The subject matter is the Capel Golf Club and the application for a rates waiver. Given that the Capel Golf Club lodged an application for a rates waiver on the 14th of October 2021 and were advised by the Director Community and Corporate Services on the 22nd of October 2021 that the Shire were reviewing the request and will be in contact shortly with a response. Question: why has the Capel Golf Club's application for a rates waiver not been included in the November Ordinary Council meeting agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Bone, for your question relating to the application made by the Capel Golf Club requesting a rate write-off for the financial year of 2021-22 and future rate waivers for the business premises. Shire officers have formally responded to the applicant on 2 occasions. The first response was sent on the 22nd of October 2021 to formally acknowledge the receipt of the application. The second response was sent on Friday the 11th of November 2021 requesting further information from the applicant in order to present a thorough application, enabling the council to properly consider the rate waiver application. As yet, Shire officers have not received a response from the applicant. A report will be submitted to the council as soon as this information is provided by the Capel Golf Club.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't aware of the 11th of November action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further public questions? Are there any applications for leave of absence? No. Declarations of interest? Where have they gone? Thank you. There are 2. A impartiality interest from Councillor Peter McCleary relating to item 13.2, the key advocacy priorities, and a indirect financial interest from Councillor Doug Kitchen on item 13.3, the disposal of property at Boynup Cattle Yards. Notice of items to be discussed behind closed doors. There is 1 item, 20.1, the nomination of an honorary freeman of the Shire of Capel. Confirmation of the minutes for the the 27th of October 2021 meeting. Is there a mover that the minutes be adopted? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Any comment? No? Over there? Anything around the table? No? We'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Announcements by the presiding person without discussion. There are two. I would like to make the following announcement in relation to the election of the Shire of Capel President and Deputy President, conducted at the Special Council meeting of 18th of October 2021. The vote for both Shire of Capel elected positions was conducted strictly in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act 1995. Although there is no requirement under the Act to do so, it has been common practice at the Shire that along with the successful nominee, the vote count has also been announced. Therefore, I can advise the following. For the election of Shire President, the count was Councillor Cara Andrew, 2 votes, Councillor Doug Kitchen, 6 votes, Councillor Rosina Mogg, 1 vote. For the election of Deputy Shire President, the count was Councillor Cara Andrew, 2 votes, Councillor Rosina Mogg, 3 votes, Councillor Sebastian Sciano, 4 votes. Thank you. And the other announcement is that item 13.4 will be dealt with before item 13.3 in tonight's agenda. Item 10, petitions, deputations and presentations. We do have one petition regarding a dog hydration station submitted by Mr. Kevin Labouchardere. Is he present tonight? No. That petition has been presented to council and included in the attachments. There are 3 motions that can come out of that petition. That the petition be received, and a report provided, or be dealt with later on in the meeting. Is there a mover for any of those actions? Councillor Tarantori?
I'd like to move that the petition be accepted and that the CEO and staff do a report.
Sure. Is there a seconder to that motion? Councillor Sciano? Any comment as the mover?
I just think with 202 votes from Dale-up residents bringing an issue to our attention, it deserves to be responded to and looked into.
Councillor Sciano? No? Any discussion around the table? For? Against? I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? Oh, sorry, I didn't. Does the mover like to close the debate? No. I'll put that to the vote then. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Motions with which previous notice has been given, there are none. There are no questions of which previous notice has been given. We move on to Chief Executive Officer Report, 13.1, the adoption of the Corporate Business Plan 2021 to 2025. Is there a mover for that? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Noonan. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've read through the document and it's the business plan's been well prepared and gives us a good guiding document. The plan has aspirations beyond the Shire's financial capacity and has been indicated in the report. And so we've got to be, the community's got to be aware that to afford some of the items that we're looking at, we've got to get some additional external fundings. Otherwise they won't materialise.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to endorse the officer's recommendation that it be accepted, and I'd like to acknowledge the hard work by the staff and also recognise the work of the former acting CEO, Rob Stewart. He was also heavily involved in the preparations for this business plan. So I think it's very, very good and heartily endorse it.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone to speak against the motion? Anyone for? No further speakers? Councillor McCleary, we'll close debate.
Thanks, Mr. President. There's not much more to add. I think it's a good document. It will become a public document, as I understand, and therefore future reference as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 13.2, the Shire of Capel Key Advocacy Priorities 2021-22 and beyond. Is there a mover? Councillor Sciano. And a seconder, Councillor McCleary. Councillor Sciano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Look, ultimately, it's a pretty straightforward recommendation. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's important to acknowledge just how great it is to have this here in front of council finally. I think we've had this, many councillors have had this discussion over many, many years about the importance of our role as advocates for the region, for the Shire, and I do strongly believe that our leadership team, in particular our CEO, have a very integral part in advocating on behalf of the local government, and we have to be able to provide them with the support and with a clear vision as well in what they're advocating for. And ultimately that's what this item is about tonight. It also helps that I'm quite happy with all the items that are on there. It's also quite interesting to see the way that even our priorities as a council have actually changed over the years. You know, the bike path is not necessarily something that we were talking much about 2 years ago, but councillors bring many different things to council, and that was one of those ideas, and I'm pretty proud to see that it's up there on the list, and that we're now supporting our supporting our CEO and our President in making clear what our priorities and our vision are for the Shire. So I support the officer's recommendation, and I ask my fellow councillors to do so as well.
Councillor McCleary.
Thanks again, Mr. President. Yeah, I was on council probably 2 years ago, and when we was in its infancy and getting legs to move forward with a linking path and things like that to between Bunbury and Bustleton, and also the links in between from Capel out to Peppy Grove and around. The big issue here is we need to get external funding again. So having a good guiding document to where we need to be and what we're looking at, our focus, it's great to see, and I commend the Shire CEO and staff to present this document, and yeah, hopefully we get some success and some results at the end of the day that reflect this plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any speaker against the recommendation? On for? Councillor Andrew?
Thanks. I'm not against it per se, but number 4 on page 19, Dale Surf Life Saving Club and community amenities. I think I've just answered my own question. I'm just wondering why, given the current situation with the DL sporting fields and facilities and the expiration of that lease, why that hasn't been ranked higher on the matrix.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Shire President. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It's probably safe to say that the first group of projects and priorities have certain targets, including, not surprisingly, the federal government and other key stakeholders. The second group is probably more aimed at state government and state government agencies and departments that hold, particularly in relation to your question, Department of Local Government, Sport, Culture and Industries that hold community sport and recreation facilities funds for those types of things. So they were separated because they largely have slightly different targets. They'll still be in the prospectus and they'll still really be given the same emphasis, but the targets are slightly different, and that's why they were grouped differently.
Anything further, Councillor? Anyone else wants to speak to the recommendation? Where's the mirror again? Councillor Sciano, would you like to close debate?
I'll just briefly say one thing. Councillor McCleary's hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, that advocacy is about trying to attract as much attention and support as we can from federal and state government. And of course, you know, these are big budget items that we can't do on our own or can barely do on our own, but we do need that support and we do have to have a clear vision. So,
Thank you, Councillor Sciano. I will put that one to the vote. Those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Now we turn to item 13.4. So we're dealing with that before 13.3. The proposed council meeting dates for 2022. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary, and the seconder, Councillor Tarantori. Councillor McCleary.
Thanks, Mr. President. I think that's pretty straightforward. That we had discussions about those, so it's a good plan ahead. Means I can fill out my calendar and know when I have to turn up.
Thank you, Councillor Tarantori. Any comments around the table? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, President. I was just wondering what the appetite was to remove January. I'm happy to move it as a formal amendment. We never used to meet in January. It got put in for this calendar year. But I think it would be nice to give the executive and the staff that break of not needing to prepare the agenda and whatnot in amongst Christmas holidays.
If I can take that as a question.
Yep.
There's a couple of reasons. There's the local government reform package. If the Shire wishes to make a submission to that, it needs to be done at the January Ordinary Council meeting in time to meet the deadline. But there are also a couple of other things that we need to receive the feedback before a February council meeting would allow. And there's also quite a number of items such as policy reviews coming up in January, and we don't really want to overload the February meeting. Yep. Would you like to add to that? Or? No? Any further discussion? Councillor McCleary, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mr. President. Look, perhaps it's handy in future things if it's been normal practice to knock January on the head, that if we do put it in, that I know we discussed it before, but we put something in the notes for the reason for having the January meeting, because I know it was the same issues were raised before about staff having time off and not packing it in as soon as they get back from Christmas break. So perhaps in next year's agenda item we add something in there, or let us know other than at the pre-meeting. Thanks.
Well, I'll put that into the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimous. And now we move back to item 13.3.
back in the big chair again. All right. The Shire President has, do I have it? Has declared an indirect financial interest in item 13.3 and therefore has to leave the room and can't participate in discussion. The item 13.3, disposal of property advertisement, buoying up cattle sale yards. Do I have a mover? Councillor McCleary, seconded Councillor Noonan. Councillor McCleary, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I would. This has been a long, arduous task for many years of what was going to happen with the buoying up sale yards. I don't know that we're still at a resolution stage, but this is something that we have to do in I suppose, the short to long term to resolve some ongoing things that are there. One of the side things is it's good for business in buoying up with something like this happening in the town. So I commend that we move on with this. It's still got a chance for people to make comment on it before it comes back to council and gets finalised.
Councillor Noonan, do you have anything to add to discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. I'd just like to, I'd certainly also like to endorse the officer's recommendation. I'd like to perhaps make the point that the council, the Shire, has been prudent, I believe, in seeking clarification from the ACCC to make sure that there are no outstanding issues that we need to be aware of that would impede this motion. That's been resolved in a satisfactory manner. I think it's also important to note that this is a 10-year period plus a 10-year on a mutual agreement extension, so both parties have to be happy to continue for that second 10-year to go ahead. And it also gives us time, and the Buoyup community time, to look at the long-term future of the Buoyup sale yards. I know that the current Agricultural Minister believes that, is of the view that online sales will take over, that there won't be a need in 10 years' time for sale yards at all. And I know that a lot of people in the industry would find that a contentious argument, and would argue that in fact there will be a need for sale yards going into the future. I believe that also that there will be, but it gives us time to start looking now for alternative sites, and for the people in Buoyup to also make their views known on that. The potential for that block or that area in the middle of Buoyup and redeveloping it, you know, in 10 or in 20 years' time, would be, you know, a game changer for Buoyup. It would reinvigorate and rejuvenate that town and provide it with enormous opportunities for its future development. So my personal view is that I would like to think that this would be the last 10+10 lease going for the Buoyup sale yards in its current position. But I think that the current conditions for the lease are appropriate to go ahead with at this stage. So I'd endorse the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Do I have anyone who'd like to speak against the recommendation? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak or to join discussion? No? Oh, Councillor Tarrant-Troy.
I'd also like to endorse the Chief Officer's recommendation here. I also believe that farmers will still want to, in 20 years, see their cattle that they buy and the sheep that they buy to ascertain their health, especially for expensive breeding stock. Yes, and hopefully this 10+10 year plan will give us time to find an appropriate new location. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Was there anyone else who'd like to speak? No? I might just add some comments here. And look, councillors, I think it is absolutely vital that this council tonight makes a decision. I think there's two things. Well, I think there's two things here. I think one is that we do need to make a decision, and I respect why it's taken so long to make that decision. The feedback from the ACCC obviously demonstrated that the Shire has allowed for competition to occur at that site. Secondly, I think is the component in the discussion around Walser, and ultimately the tricky situation that we're in as a lessee who doesn't own the equipment or infrastructure that's on the site. And quite frankly, I think that's black and white. But I know that we have used the time in deferral productively. We've sought that legal advice. We've allowed the ACCC to do its investigation, and I'm not quite surprised at all with the outcomes of that. But I have had the opportunity, obviously, to speak with the Minister. I think it's vital that we make a decision. I think it's vital because the impacts of not making a decision and what that has on the industry, on the cattle industry in the southwest, and that it is a vital part of buoying up, and it's a vital part of the entire industry throughout the southwest. Councillor Noonan's really, and Councillor Tarantroy as well, touched on it, but I think hit the nail on the head in the fact that this 10 years is really the time that we take to build a vision on what the future of the buoying up sale yards will look like. And I think there's a lot of options in front of us, and we're in early stages of obviously considering what all those options are. But for now, I support renewing the lease with a mutual agreement of an additional 10 years, so a 10 and 10 with Walser. And I look forward to, obviously there will be many submissions, I think, will come through from independent stock agents, as I fully expect, and that's why I originally really wanted to get this on the table, because that would have allowed, obviously, the conversation to occur and the submissions to take place. So I fully expect many of them to come to us and to have to deal with it in January. But I think that this Shire has done its due diligence, and we've done a lot of work in this space over the last 6 months, and I think we are definitely prepared to build the future and to have a vision and to handle anything that comes at us in January. So obviously support the officer's recommendation. Was there, I'll give the last call. Is anyone else who wanted to speak? Otherwise I'll give it to Councillor McCleary to close debate. You happy?
Thanks, Mr. Giano. Yeah, look, I concur with all the comments that have been made around the table, and yeah, there is a vision that we need to come up with in the future as we work through. But this is an agreement in a lease sense. It's not getting into whatever the commercial arrangements are in there. It's purely an agreement to lease some land. It's out for comment in the period. I look forward to when it comes back and what submissions are made, and working proactively with the future of the buoying up sale yards.
Councillors, I put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We will ask the Shire President to return to the chair.
Right, thank you. 13.5, the recruitment of senior officers, Shire directors. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. A seconder, Councillor Andrew. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a long time coming, this decision, but I understand the reasons why. I'd like to extend the thanks from the council to all those staff that have acted in those positions over that time. I commend them in their efforts, and it makes it a bit difficult. And thanks. And I recommend this decision to the fellow councillors.
Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, President. I concur with Councillor McCleary that we have had a bit of a rotating stock through these positions for probably a little bit too long. I too understand the reasons why we held off on putting permanent people into these roles. But particularly in the last few months, Samantha and Roy have just done a really great job, as did Kristen before Roy. Yeah, hopefully you both apply for the roles. So, thank you.
Is there anyone to speak against the recommendation? Anyone wish to speak for it? Any further comments? Well, I suppose I'll just add my thanks as Shire President to the staff that has filled in these positions as well over the time. It has been greatly appreciated, and you've kept the organisation ticking along, all of you. So thank you very much. Councillor McCleary, would you like to close?
I don't think I can say much more than what's been said, so yeah, put it to the vote.
Put that one to the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 13.6, the proposed Economic Development Committee terms of reference. There are 3 recommendations there. We will do them one at a time. Is there a mover for the first recommendation? Councillor Noonan. Seconder, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The genesis of this this proposed Economic Development Committee and its terms of reference came from discussions with both the former acting CEO, Rob Stewart, and also with our substantive CEO, Gordon McMile, and looking at the opportunities to provide or to source funding and to develop economic opportunities within the Shire that had perhaps hadn't had a focus on them. So to give that, sorry, I shouldn't be debating the article. I should be just reading it. Or is it? Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is an enormous opportunity, a tremendous opportunity for us to look at alternative sources of funding, something that we really haven't had a focus on for the recent past. So I would endorse the officer's recommendation there and hope that we can establish this committee and its terms of reference.
Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, President. I too am so pleased that this has finally kind of the work's come together and this has come to council. Our heavy reliance on rates just is not sustainable, and so I'm so excited about some of the opportunities that this advisory committee might come up with or will come up with, I'm sure, to increase our coffers and really provide sustainable long-term financial rewards to our Shire.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone to speak against the recommendation? You want to speak for it? Councillor Tantori?
I'm for the officer's recommendation for several reasons. It's going to help us build better relationship with the state and federal government to get funding for our community, and that's the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further speakers? Councillor Noonan, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing further to add.
I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. The recommendation number 2, that Council endorse the terms of reference for the Capel Economic Development Advisory Committee as per attachment 1 of this report. Is there a mover? Councillor Tarantori. Seconded, Councillor Sciano. Councillor Tarantori.
I read the terms of reference document and I felt it was fair. It outlined everything very clearly, and yeah, it'll be great to have that terms of reference endorsed tonight.
Councillor Sciano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I think just one thing that's worth mentioning specifically out of that terms of reference is I quite like the membership layout. Obviously we've got a lot of committees where we almost have half of council on committee, and I'm sure there's probably more than 3 councillors perhaps that may want to be on this committee, but I think the involvement of local business and community, along with key stakeholders in economic development in the southwest, I think that was a really. I'm sure this is probably the CEO or staff have probably had a quick look at a couple others of these as well to get a bit of an idea on who to put there. But I think the membership is quite powerful, and I think that will really be the driving force behind this committee. So I thought that's just worth a mention. But yeah, fully support the officer's recommendation.
Is there a speaker against the motion? Is there a speaker for it? Any comments? Councillor Territory, do you want to close debate?
Just to say again, I endorse the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimous. All right, councillors, before we move to the third recommendation, we will suspend standing orders to allow discussion as to who wishes to nominate for the positions. So I will move that standing orders 10.1 and 10.2 be suspended to allow discussion of the item. Is there a second for that? Councillor Andrew. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. All right. Well, who wants to nominate for a position? Okay. Yep. All right. Yep. Well, we'll go to the chair position first. Is there anyone wishing to nominate for the position of chair? Councillor Noonan, Councillor Tarantori. Nominating for chair. Yep. So we'll have to have a ballot for that position. I did nominate to be on it, but I've since withdrawn because there's a bit of appetite for the committee. So,
Thank you, Shire President. Through you as Chair, the Act allows that if the Shire President, pardon me, wants to be on the committee, then they automatically are on the committee. But the Act doesn't specify that the Shire President is automatically the Chair. So that has to still be determined. So there's a slight difference there.
So Councillor Noonan and Councillor Tarantori are nominated for the chair. We'll have to have a ballot. Does anyone wish to nominate for the position of deputy chair? Councillor Mogg. Do you have to go back in this? My apologies, councillors. We'll do the ballot on the chair position first in case that person wants to nominate for the deputy position. So, yeah, Councillor Noonan and Tarantori have nominated for that position, so we'll have a ballot.
Excuse me, Mr. President. I'm going to have to declare an impartiality on here because I'm a member of the Regional Development Australia Committee and they're making up part of that. Yeah. Treasurer. Sorry, voluntary position. Oh, right, I better vote. Yeah. So,
Through you, Chair, I confirm that Councillor Noonan is the elected Chair of the Economic Development Advisory Committee and the vote count is 6-2.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We'll now move to nominations for the position of Deputy Chair. Councillor Bogg is nominating. Councillor Taranto is nominating. Are there any further nominations for the position of Deputy? Councillor Sciano. Any further? No. Well, I'll ask the CEO to conduct a ballot for the Deputy position.
Through you, Chair. The first round of the vote was Councillor Terrantroy 3 votes, Councillor Mogg 3 votes, and Councillor Sciano 2 votes. Therefore, Councillor Sciano will drop out and will have a second ballot with just 2 nominees. Through you, Chair, the second vote for the Deputy Chair of the Economic Development Advisory Committee successful is Councillor Mogg, and the vote is 5-3.
Okay. We now move on to nominations for the member position of the committee. Are there any nominations? Councillor Sciano, Councillor Andrew, and Councillor Terrantory. Are there any further nominations for the position? No. I'll ask the CEO to conduct a ballot for the member position.
Through you, Chair, for the position of member of the Economic Development Advisory Committee, successfully voted is Councillor Territory with 4 votes, Councillor Sciano with 3 votes, and Councillor Andrew with 1 vote. Councillor Territory. So we just need someone to nominate as proxy. Hopefully one person.
And now I'll call for nominations for the position of proxy member. Is there anyone wishing to nominate? Councillor Andrew? Is anyone else wishing to nominate?
I'll withdraw my nomination.
Thank you, Councillor.
You're still going to need
Save them for next time. Okay, I'll have one nomination from Councillor Andrew. Are there any other nominations? No? Right. We'll put Councillor Andrew in that position. All right.
So motion to resume standing orders.
Yes. All right, I'll move the motions that we reinstate standing orders. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Andrew. All those in favour? It is carried unanimous. All right. Yeah, there's that interest.
Oh, just need to note, yeah.
We've just had one late impartiality interest declaration from Councillor Peter McCleary on item 13.6 as we are considering the proposed Economic Development Committee. The nature of that interest is that he is a volunteer at the RDA Southwest Committee. Right.
So now you can put.
Just read the motion out. Fill in and then answer the yes. Okay, officers' recommendation 3 that the council appoints Councillor Noonan, the chair, Councillor Mogg, the deputy chair, Councillor Territory, the member, and Councillor Andrew as proxy to the Capel Economic Development Advisory Committee for a period ending at the ordinary election day in October 2023. Is there a mover for that? Councillor McCleary. A seconder, Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary. Councillor Dillon. Is there anyone to speak against that recommendation? Speakers for it? Any comment? Councillor McCleary, would you like to close? I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, staff, for your diligence, council for your indulgence, and members of the public for your patience. All right. Item 13.7, the Shire of Capel Chief Executive Officer, finalisation of key performance indicators and performance review process and policy. Again, there are 3 recommendations as part of this, and we will deal with them separately. Officer's recommendation 1, is there a mover? Councillor McCleary, seconder, Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Being new to this council after a short break of 2 years, it's good to see that we've got a move on a CEO finally in that period. And yeah, look, I recommend accepting this recommendation 1 as we move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Sciano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Look, I think Council's been quite involved in this process, I believe. Really, these additional KPIs have come straight from the corporate business plan, and I think they're very much in line with what we discussed earlier with our list of priorities and advocacy positions as well. I do always think that the number 1 role of a CEO should be to shake the barrel for a bit of money and to be an advocate for the Shire, and it's a big priority within these KPIs, so I'm very happy with them how they are. and I think the process to how we've ended up here has been fantastic as well. So support the officer's recommendation.
Is there anyone to speak against the recommendation? Speaker for? Any further discussion? No. Councillor McCleary, would you like to close? No. I will put that one to the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimous. Officer's recommendation number 2. This is a large recommendation that goes over a few pages. Please be aware. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Andrew, and a seconder. Councillor McCleary. Councillor Andrew. Okay. Councillor McCleary. Is there a speaker against the recommendation? Speaker for? No comments. Councillor Andrew. Nothing. I will put that to the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Okay, officer's recommendation number 3, the appointment of councillors to the Performance and Remuneration Review Panel. I will get that out correctly. I will move that we suspend Standing Orders 10.1 and 2 to allow discussion as to who wishes to nominate for those positions. Seconded, Councillor McCleary. Those in favour? That is carried unanimous. All right.
So we've currently got 5 councillors that have indicated.
Yep.
Do we have any more?
So 5 nominations were received prior to the meeting from Councillor Mogg, Councillor Kitchen, Councillor McCleary, Councillor Sciano and Councillor Tarantori. Are there any further nominations for the committee? There's 5 nominations received for 5 positions, but there is a proxy position. There's a proxy position. You happy to nominate for that position, Councillor? Yep. Any further nominations for any positions? No? There's no need to go to a ballot then. Anyone want to make any discussion before we come out of suspended standing orders? No. Then I move that we reinstate standing orders. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Okay, so officer's recommendation 3, that council appoints Councillor Mogg, Councillor Kitchen, Councillor McCleary, Councillor Sciano and Councillor Tarantori to the CEO Performance and Remuneration Review Panel, and Councillor Andrew as the proxy for a period ending on the ordinary election day of October 2023, and 2, endorses the appointed Chief CEO Performance and Remuneration Review Panel to report and make a recommendation to the February 2022 ordinary meeting regarding the completion of the CEO's probationary period. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Noonan. And a seconder? Councillor Tarantori. Councillor Noonan. Do you wish to make discussion? No. Councillor Tarantori? Nope. A speaker against that? For? No discussion? Do you wish to close any discussion? Not that there was any. Nope. Well, I will put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those in favour? That is carried unanimous. All right, we now move on to item 14 of the agenda, infrastructure and development reports. Item 14.1, home occupation development application, lot 1158, Antelope Turn, Dalyellup. Okay. Yep. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Mogg. And a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll accept the motion as read and support the officer's recommendation, which is very lengthy and in detail, and thank their efforts. Thank you.
Councillor Sciano.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm happy with the officer's recommendation. I guess to add to the discussion, I think we were aware that this came to council because there was an objection, but I think the objector is now happy with what's presented to council as well, so that's a bit of a win-win. So yeah, fully support the officer's recommendation.
I'll just ask the CEO to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, councillors, there was one objection to this proposal. The objector to the proposal sent an email to council today basically saying that once they'd read the report and that they were now happy. So I think it's important that councillors just know that when.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Is there a speaker against the recommendation? Speakers for? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's always good to see someone getting off their bat and doing a bit of business in there, and it's good that we've been able to approve this, or we don't know yet, but put it to the vote, and I recommend that we should approve this recommendation so we can move forward with it.
Is there a speaker against? Speaker for? Any discussion? Councillor Mogg, would you like to close? All right. I will put that to the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimous. Item 14.2, Bushfire Risk Management Plan 2021 to 2026. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Tarantori, and a seconder. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Tarantori.
I'd just like to endorse the officer's recommendation. The report and the risk management plan is really good. I've read it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the work of the staff.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, look, it's a really good document. It's a lot of work's gone into that, so thanks to the executive staff. It's incredibly detailed and wonderful reading. I'd encourage all members of the Capel community to maybe have a look at it. Bushfire is a significant risk in our Shire, and more people need to understand the issues the Shire faces and the things we need to do to mitigate that risk. So I highly recommend the endorsement too.
Thank you, Councillor. Is anyone to speak against the recommendation? Any speakers for? Councillor Sciano.
Mr. President, could I just ask a question? Perhaps I did notice there was an announcement today about some funding for bushfire mitigation. Would it be my understanding that that funding is available to the Shire of Capel for implementation of this plan? Is that correct?
The CEO.
Through you, Chair, yeah, that's exactly the case. The importance of the bushfire risk management plan being adopted by council then does enable the Shire to actually apply for funding to implement that plan, so it's a critical first piece of the puzzle.
All good. Are there any speakers? Yes, Councillor Andrew.
The announcement that Councillor Sciano just mentioned, what kind of bushfire mitigation are they prepared to put funding towards?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development. Sorry, I forgot your title then. It just wasn't coming to me.
Sorry. Through the chair, the kinds of activities that they're looking to fund are as detailed in the plan, and there'll be things like fuel load reduction, some bushfire fire breaks, tracks and things, access for vehicles, gates, things like that. They're all detailed in our plan.
Anything further, councillor? Does anyone else wish to speak to the item? No? I'll ask Councillor Territory to close discussion. Nothing? I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried 7-1. Item 14.3, tender 2021-23, reconstruction and widening of the Boynup Road West. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary, and seconder, Councillor Noonan. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I note in the item that if we don't proceed with this, there's the likelihood that we lose funding from the regional roads group. So, and it's good to see some roads fixed up that need fixing.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, this is stage 3 of 6, I believe, and it will go down to the western end of Boynup West Road, where it intersects with Bustle Highway. So it's a good, certainly good to see that road being repaired, brought up to a good standard. So I'd certainly endorse the recommendation.
Thank you, councillor. Is there anyone wishing to speak against the recommendation? Speakers for? Councillor Territory.
I just wanted to note that the stage 2 and 3 works being monitored closely to ensure that the construction program to mitigate risks associated with working closer to winter months was a really, really good thing, so that the same problem that we had before won't occur again.
You want to speak against? Any discussion? No. Councillor McCleary, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's all been said, and I hope we move this motion.
Thank you, councillor. I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 14.4, the depot fuel system. There it is. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Territory. Seconder, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Territory.
I endorse the officer's recommendation. It's fiscally responsible and also environmentally sound. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, look, this was something we probably knew was going to happen at some point in time. It's a shame it's reared its ugly head at this juncture in the Shire, but when you look over the risk implications, not only do we have a legislative compliance extreme issue there, but there's high environmental and high health and safety issues as well. And I do think while it's a big impost on the Shire and the community, it's something we need to get done pretty much pronto. So I also endorse the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, councillor. Is there anyone wishing to speak against the recommendation? Speakers for? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's one of these items that pops up where it's unfunded in the budget, so this is almost the equivalent of 1% of rates, so the funding has to come from somewhere else. I realise that we've got to go out for a tender on the works in its entirety. There are 2 stages to this works. One's quite essential, and that's capping the existing fuel tank. The other one, do we need a fuel tank? I know we spoke about this. I'd like to see it come back, and hopefully we don't see a variation of pricing when it comes back in, because that could change the decision of the second part where we have to actually put a tank in. So we need to give that consideration when it comes back to council, I understand.
Thank you. Any further speakers? No. Councillor Territory, do you like to close debate? No. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. We now move to section 15, Community and Corporate Reports. Item 15.1, the Long-Term Financial Plan 2021 to 2031. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary, seconder. Councillor Territory. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Long-term financial plans are our best guess at where we're heading in the future. They give us a bit of guidance as we get close to establishing the rates each year. One of the key things in this report is we're in deficit for a number of years. We're chewing into our reserves quite heavily, and we're dependent on external funding for a lot of our future expenses. So we've got to be aware of that as we're setting budgets and coming up into the January to May period before we set that. So yeah, look, it's good. It's a good guide. Best guess, because who knows what the CPI is going to do in that period, and who knows what borrowings are going to look like, and yeah, lots of things that we don't know about. But yeah, it's a good report. I think it's been well laid out. It's an interesting difference to what I've seen in past years. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Territory.
Just to reiterate what Councillor McCleary said, yes, we've got a bit of work to do, and we need to get some funding to be able to provide the services that the Shire of Capel residents expect. Yes, thank you.
Is there a speaker against the motion? Speakers for? Any discussion? No. Councillor McCleary, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, sure will. Look, as I said before, it's a good guiding document. I like the layout. I encourage the community to read it so get an understanding of where our budgets are and the challenges that we've got ahead of us over the next few years.
All right, I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 15.2, accounts paid during the month of October 2021. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Sciano. And a seconder? Councillor Andrew. Councillor Sciano.
Nothing, thank you, Mr. President.
Councillor Andrew. Any discussion around the table? No. Anything further you want to add, Councillor Sciano? No. I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? Sorry, I'll just ask that one again. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.3, the financial statements for the 30th September 2021. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Sciano. Seconder, Councillor Noonan. Councillor Sciano.
No, nothing.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I might just take the opportunity to point out the link between obviously this this motion and the information we have here and the previous motion, but one, the 15.1, the long-term financial plan. And I think it's important to point out when residents, ratepayers do look at 15.1, they'll see a table in that recommendation with assumed forecasts, which includes assumed forecasts of annual rate increases. Now, obviously, with any projection, you have to put some figure in. Obviously, all of those figures will, or every year, council will sit down and will make a decision based on what's happening in the Shire, what's happening with the expenses that the Shire has, and also what's happening globally, nationally, economically. You'll also note that insurance expenses are forecast to rise at 8% year on year. Utility charges forecast to go up 6% year on year. So these are real, and they're based on best practice information from the industry. So there are concerns, there are headwinds ahead of us. However, it's important to note that the Shire is very actively conscious of the importance of pursuing alternative sources of funding, that we will not...
Apologies, Councillor. Are you on item 15.3?
Yeah, 15.3. I'll get back to... Sorry, I will bring it into 15.3. And really, the point that I'm making is that we're in the current position because, or it could be argued that we're in the current position because we've had 2 years of 0% rate rises. Now, there are other councils who've had 5 years of 0% rate rises, and yet they've managed to thrive, survive and thrive. We've just finished, or we haven't finished, we're in the middle of still a once in a century pandemic, and the previous council responded to that with those 2% rate rises. And the reason for going into all of that is, if you look on page 112, I think the graph of the debtors outstanding is a very important snapshot of the struggle or the difficulty that a lot of ratepayers have experienced over the last 2 years. You can see that prior to the pandemic becoming an issue, our debtors outstanding was negligible, under $10,000, whereas during the course of the pandemic it has topped 140,000 in terms of people struggling to pay or finding it difficult to pay. We only need to look at election results in some of the neighbouring shires to see how ratepayers have responded to shires that have not been sympathetic to the difficulties that they find themselves in. And I'm not saying that that we should be driven solely by electoral results from certainly our shire or other shires, but I think it is important that we are mindful of the very heavy impost that rates do represent for a lot of people, and to reassure ratepayers that we are consciously looking at alternative sources of raising revenue, and that really, in the words...
Apologies, Councillor, I'll just ask for you to be a bit more relevant to the subject.
Yep. And that we will look for alternative sources. And so I do recommend that these financial statements be accepted. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the recommendation? Speakers for? Any discussion? Nope. Councillor Sciano, would you like to close? Nope. I will put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 16, new business of an urgent nature. There is none. Item 17, public question time. Are there any questions from the gallery? Yes?
Going back to the my traffic problem in Dalyella.
Apologies, just ask you to state your name and...
Brian Hayes from Dalyella.
Thank you.
Going back to my question about the traffic in Dalyella Boulevard.
Yep.
You're saying that the main roads are saying there's not a problem.
I can't speak for Main Roads.
But your report said they're saying there's not a problem.
Main Roads WA have a policy that
Yeah.
deals with that, and they require that speed, excessive speed counts be in the 87th percentile and above.
Yeah.
The traffic counting that was conducted on Dalyellop Boulevard didn't meet that matrix, and so from their point of view, I suppose, again, not wanting to speak for them, was that it didn't justify investment from them. So we have forwarded those results to WA Police for them to consider them as part of patrol routes that they might undertake.
Yep.
However, the Shire will continue to undertake reporting and monitoring of Dalyellop Boulevard.
Yep.
And as updates come aware, or if it becomes eligible under that matrix that Main Road set, then we'll look at doing some speed mitigation measures.
Yep. Is there any chance, I'd like to see some of you councillors come and stand in my front door and watch the traffic go past my place, because I live on the corner, and if I got T-boned, somebody's going to pay for it, not me. Who's responsible? If somebody won't drop the speed limit there or do something to slow the traffic down, who's responsible?
Yeah, I'll ask the CEO to answer that one, thank you.
Yeah, and also, can I get a copy of that report you've got there?
That'll be provided for in the minutes.
Yep. All right, so can I get that copy? The minutes will be on the...
The minutes will be published on the website
Okay.
in up to 10 days.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Hayes. Just to add to that, what the traffic monitoring showed was certainly there were people, so the 85th percentile basically is saying that 15% of the people that went through during that count were exceeding the speed limit by more than 10 kilometres an hour. And certainly, so slightly less than 15%. So what that means is, and that's obviously an average, there are certainly within that traffic count extremes, and there were certainly people within our traffic count that were exceeding the speed limit by far more than 10 kilometres an hour. At the same time, there was also a number of people that were more than 10 kilometres an hour well under the speed limit. So again, but as the Shire President... So just to reiterate, what the Main Roads policy dictates is the speed limits or the speed recordings that would allow the Shire to install traffic calming. And what our current, and we will keep monitoring that location and other hotspots through the Dalyellop area, but the current speed data doesn't fulfil the Main Roads requirements, and it doesn't allow the Shire to install traffic calming in that location at this point in time. We will keep monitoring that location, and sometimes even just the presence of traffic counting actually slows people down, albeit temporarily. But if the situation changes and the traffic counts do come within the scope of Main Roads policy, we'll be absolutely applying for funding and installing traffic calming as soon as we don't want people to go quicker just to allow us to install traffic calming, but that's the situation we're in.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, and thank you, Mr. Hayes, for the question. Are there any other public questions? Nope. Item 18, motions without notice. Are there any? Nope. Item 19, notice of motions to be considered at the next ordinary meeting of the council. Are there any? Nope. We now move on to item 20, items for consideration behind closed doors. There is one item, 20.1, and for that we will have to close the meeting to the public. So, yes. All right, I'll move a procedural motion that the matter be considered behind closed doors. think that was seconded, Councillor Noonan. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you for your attendance tonight. You are more than welcome to stay around and join us after the meeting. Oh, Councillor Towntree. You're not technically supposed to leave your seat. Can I ask the council to please resume their seats?
You meant to stay at the table, Councillor.
Yeah.
You meant to stay at the table. Sorry. You'll have to wait. Roy? Happy for staff to stay?
Yes, I'm sure they know anyway. Okay. Hang on. We've got to turn everything back on now, don't we? Then after. Yeah, oh, you can. Yeah. Is it all on? All right. There being no further business on tonight's agenda, I will declare the meeting closed at 8 o'clock exactly. Thank you very much for your attendance.